Why does this unattractive girl still reside in her parents' house? It's quite bothersome. Could you kindly vacate the premises immediately? You clearly don't belong here. Pack your things and return to your parents' house. About a month after my husband passed away, I found myself living with and caring for my mother-in-law. These harsh words were directed at me by two individuals. Did I do something wrong? I've been contributing by paying $3,000 a month for rent. However, if they view me as a nuisance, I'll leave the house as they wish. A month later, an apology came from my mother-in-law, tears streaming down her face. But apologies alone won't resolve the issue. I decided to share a surprising fact with her. It had been a year since I married her son, and we have been living in their house. My husband and I share the love for camping and outdoor activities, quickly bonding and leading to our marriage. Now I was taking care of my mother-in-law, who had been alone since my father-in-law's passing. Her initial animosity turned into gratitude, and we built a genuine parent-child bond. My husband and I had a decent income, and we were giving her $3,000 a month as rent. Despite this, financial troubles arose. My sister-in-law, who didn't live with us, began making frequent demands for money. I intervened when she asked for financial help, suggesting ways to cut expenses. Instead, my husband, realizing the need for his sister to become more self-reliant, firmly advised her to stop depending on their parents. This created a rift, but my sister-in-law reluctantly changed her behavior regarding money matters. Since my father-in-law's passing, my mother-in-law had been more lenient with money, often granting her children's requests. However, it became apparent that my sister-in-law was exploiting this generosity, demanding larger sums of money and taking charge of the family's finances. My husband managed the situation. One day, as I went to work, he wasn't feeling well and had gone to the hospital in the morning. At first, I believed it was just a common cold. But during lunch, my husband called, revealing that it wasn't just a cold. They had discovered cancer. The tests indicated that it was quite advanced, and I was told I had approximately a year left to live. His shocking words rendered me speechless, and panic set in as my thoughts froze. After standing still for a while, reality hit me hard, and I rushed to the hospital where my husband was. At that time, my husband still had enough strength to converse normally, but as the treatment continued, his strength diminished. After 6 months, he could hardly talk. 7 months later, struggling to breathe, my husband tried to convey something important to me. The content of his words was surprising and left me in shock. I spent several days absorbed in those thoughts, but a week later, my husband passed away. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't grasp what was happening. However, after his passing, I was busy with a funeral week and settling his affairs. Days passed, and just when I thought I could finally start coming to terms with my husband's death, an unexpected incident occurred. I have something to talk about. Is now a good time? My sister-in-law asked. Of course. What would you like to talk about? How much did you hear from my brother? Actually, I heard that a spot opened up in a very popular nursing home that's hard to get into. Why don't we consider admitting Mom there? My brother is no longer here, and taking care of that old lady must be a hassle for you, right? My sister-in-law's smirk about this topic made my heart clench. To bring up such a topic right after my husband's death, but looking into her eyes, I could tell she was serious. This house is too big for just that old woman, don't you think? It's a waste if my family and I live here. You can live alone without any worries. I think it's the best choice for everyone. While my sister-in-law didn't say it explicitly, her remarks gave the impression that she had been eagerly awaiting my husband's death. The way she trivialized my husband's death and her disdainful attitude towards my mother-in-law. I couldn't tolerate it anymore. I appreciate your suggestion, but I have no intention of doing such a thing. I plan to continue living with my mother-in-law, taking my husband's place. When I firmly declined, my sister-in-law left the house in a bad mood. Originally, it seemed she viewed my mother-in-law as a convenient source of money, so her attitude was not surprising. However, I was honestly shocked by her blatant actions. Nonetheless, I had no intention of letting my sister-in-law have her way, nor did I plan to put my mother-in-law in a nursing home. But an event a week later shook my resolve. Upon returning from work, I found my mother-in-law glaring at me angrily and my sister-in-law smirking beside her. "I'm disappointed in you. I want you to leave this house. How dare you plan to put someone in a nursing home without consulting? What are you trying to do, take over the house?" "No, that's not my intention." "What do you mean? Why don't you just be honest? It was your proposal, wasn't it? You said to put Mom in a nursing home and sell this family home, and suggested we split the sale proceeds, didn't you?" "I never said such a thing." Shocked by this unexpected betrayal, I struggled to speak but managed to express my thoughts. I was genuinely taken aback, completely unprepared for such forceful tactics just because things weren't going her way. The pain and sadness enveloped me as my mother-in-law looked down on me as if I were worthless. "I don't consider you family anymore. Please leave this house right now," she shouted at me with rage on her face. It seemed my mother-in-law had no intention of listening to me. "Understood. If that's what you want, I'll leave as you wish," I responded. Perhaps my sister-in-law had influenced her, but this was a clear betrayal for me as I had decided to continue caring for my mother-in-law in place of my husband. I quickly packed my things and decided to return to my parents' home. I needed to find a new place to live and had a lot to do, but being kicked out by my mother-in-law deeply hurt me, so I decided to rest at my parents' home for a while. About a month later, my sister-in-law accused me of withdrawing money from our parents' account without permission. "Is that you? You withdrew money from our parents' account without permission, didn't you? Why is there not a single dollar left in the account?" "Don't say such ridiculous things. Are you calling me a thief now? Pretending you don't know? If you keep doing this, I'll get the police involved. Come to our parents' house right now." After saying this, my sister-in-law abruptly hung up the phone. Caught in someone's conspiracy and now being accused of theft, I had had enough. I had anticipated issues with the mortgage of the family home. There must still be several years of mortgage payments left unpaid. Honestly, I didn't have the time or energy to deal with my sister-in-law. I wanted to cut ties, but I had reasons why I couldn't. There was still a truth I had to reveal with a heavy heart. Immediately headed to my in-laws' home. Just like the day I left, my mother-in-law glared at me, and my sister-in-law was there too, giving me the same look. Did he steal money from the house or withdraw it from the account? I don't know, but give it back quickly. You both were working, right? So there must be a significant balance, right? What are you talking about? There's nothing left of my father-in-law's inheritance. We've been covering all the living expenses and rent. Do you think the inheritance would cover everything? What, really? My words left my sister-in-law looking at my mother-in-law in surprise. It was clear that there was an understanding between the two. My mother-in-law knew that we had been financially supporting the family home, but she probably thought that my father-in-law's inheritance was sufficient for a while. However, the actual situation was quite different. Maybe in this situation isn't my mother-in-law the victim. Mother-in-law, it was your daughter who was misusing father-in-law's inheritance, wasn't it? At that moment, my mother-in-law's expression changed dramatically. There was an air of confusion as if she couldn't grasp what I was saying. But I never lied to deceive others. The attitude of my sister-in-law made it clear that what I was saying was true. Her expression changed the moment the inheritance was mentioned, even though she had been glaring at me sharply before. "I've seen through the schemes you've been plotting and the misdeeds you've been committing. Actually, my husband revealed to me that since we started living together, he took over managing the household finances. He noticed a significant decrease in the inheritance supposed to be received by my mother-in-law, and he found it abnormal. Moreover, my sister-in-law's frequent and unusual financial requests seemed suspicious to him, so he confronted her. It turned out she had withdrawn cash from the inheritance without any permission. She was actually stealing. Wait, is that true? My sister-in-law stammered in confusion. The moment I revealed the truth, my mother-in-law's anger immediately turned towards her. It seemed my mother-in-law hadn't realized the money was gradually decreasing, as she had been living modestly since my father-in-law's passing and never paid much attention to finances. My husband, being in accounting, was aware of even minor financial changes. This mistake came to light when he confronted my sister-in-law, yet for my mother-in-law, her daughter remained precious, leading my husband to keep a secret. Under the promise of repayment, the reason my husband sternly stopped her from borrowing money from my mother-in-law was because of this. I only learned about this a few days before my husband passed away. It was truly surprising, but it seems to be the truth. To steal someone else's money, even if they are family, what were you thinking? Can't you differentiate between what's right and what's wrong? My mother-in-law berated my sister-in-law. Stop making excuses, you thieving cat. Her face became increasingly red with anger, as if she was about to burst. I'm not someone who clung to money. I have a strict moral compass, especially harsh on acts of malice and betrayal. Her decision to denounce me, seeing my act of sending her to a nursing home as a betrayal, was also based on these values. These values applied not just to me, a non-blood relative, but also to her own daughter. However, I had more to reveal. Also, the large amount of money you got by betraying your family was used for gambling, right? Huh? Wait a minute, what are you talking about? My sister-in-law feigned ignorance. I've investigated everything. You'll understand if you look at these. I showed them several photos from an envelope, pictures secretly taken by my deceased husband, clearly capturing my sister-in-law entering and exiting a casino. Your husband works for a foreign company, and you should be financially comfortable. My husband always wondered why you were so desperate for money. The investigation unexpectedly revealed your gambling addiction. Tell me, how enjoyable was it to gamble with someone else's money? What is this? This is called stalking. This is no joke. You're calling others thieves, and now this. And there's something else I need to tell you, mother-in-law. It was your daughter who suggested sending you to the nursing home. You know what? Finally, I've reached this point. It's time to reveal everything and then bring this to a close. My sister-in-law's true nature, previously unnoticed, was revealed through this incident. This should make my mother-in-law realize that blaming me was a mistake. Additionally, my mother-in-law was also manipulated by my sister-in-law's schemes. With the truth out, she should understand my position. I'm not sure if this will be conclusive evidence, but I want you to see this. I said, presenting my mother-in-law with the text messages between me and my sister-in-law. The history showed my sister-in-law sending me numerous links and nursing home suggestions, serving as evidence of her scheming. Were you really planning to abandon your own mother? That's not it, it's all a misunderstanding. Please just listen to my side of the story, my sister-in-law pleaded. It seems you plan to kick my mother-in-law out and live here with your family, right? This house isn't that old, it's still perfectly livable. Who was it that was thinking only of themselves, trying to take everything? Can you think about it calmly for a moment? As I spoke, my mother-in-law seemed to grasp the situation. She then looked at me sadly, as if she knew what she did was wrong, and turned her angry voice towards my sister-in-law. How selfish can you be to repay kindness with betrayal? After all this time, thinking of you as family. How do you see me? Don't mock me. Wait, just listen. There's a huge reason for this. At that moment, a loud noise echoed from the hallway and footsteps followed as my sister-in-law's husband entered the room. Sorry I'm late, caught in traffic. It's okay. Oh, mother-in-law, I hadn't told you yet, but I asked him to come. I left the house key open so he could enter any time. Surprised by the sudden appearance of my sister-in-law's husband, both were taken aback. I explained the situation, and they quickly understood this issue wasn't just between me and my mother-in-law. It also affected my sister-in-law's husband. My sister-in-law's husband could easily access his salary and savings, raising further suspicions as she had been embezzling my mother-in-law's money. I had spoken to him in advance and arranged for him to hear the conversation via phone. I've been listening from the start. Enough with the excuses, just admit your mistakes already. That's despicable, but what you've done is a serious crime. I was shocked when I checked the bank account earlier. It was a big mistake to let you manage our finances. The atmosphere froze in an eerie silence due to the incredible anger of my sister-in-law's husband. Having said all I wanted to say, I decided not to intervene further and just silently watched my sister-in-law's husband lecture her. His reprimands were so intense that it made me tremble just watching, but I didn't feel bad for her at all. I only thought about ensuring she repays the money and that she shouldn't assume this would be the end of it. The lecturing continued for a while, and eventually she knelt down to apologize to both me and my mother-in-law before leaving. According to my sister-in-law's husband, he had left the management of their household finances entirely to her, thinking they were saving and increasing their savings by cutting back on expenses. However, it turned out she was gambling away all the money saved. As her gambling intensified, she eventually incurred debts on her credit cards and began stealing money from my mother-in-law to pay it off. The total amount she owes from various sources is now more than what she has stolen from her husband and mother-in-law. Her husband, upon learning about this, decided to divorce her but plans to make her work to repay the full amount for the money she stole and the child support she misused. Until then, he had no intention of divorcing her and was constantly monitoring her behavior, hoping for her to change herself. It looks like challenging times are coming for my sister-in-law. Later, my mother-in-law apologized for the misunderstanding. We still meet for tea about once a month. Now that my husband has passed away, I want to keep a good relationship with his mother. She brought him into this world, and I want to support her as much as I can.
The day was overcast, the kind of gloomy weather that seemed fitting for a funeral. As I stood there, surrounded by mourners, I couldn't help but reflect on the life of Charles, my father-in-law. He had been a kind man, a pillar in the community, and his absence left a void that was palpable in the air. I glanced over at Michael, my husband, standing rigid as the chief mourner. His face, usually unreadable, today seemed like an emotionless mask. I wondered, not for the first time, what thoughts were hiding behind that facade. The funeral procession was a grand affair, much like Charles himself. He was a man who had touched many lives, and it showed in the number of people who had come to pay their respects. As I listened to the eulogies, a mix of sorrow and admiration filled the air. Charles had been not just a family man, but a mentor, a friend to many. After the ceremony, as the crowd began to disperse, Michael leaned in and said, almost too casually, "I hope to be sent off like this too, surrounded by family and many acquaintances. Laura, I'll pick out some BGM, so count on you to handle it." His words struck me as odd, given the solemnity of the moment. It was typical of Michael to think about himself even in the face of his father's death. I felt a surge of anger, but managed to keep my voice steady. "Who are you to say that? Ask your real family for that. After all, we're just a family for show, right?" "I don't owe you that much," I retorted, my voice laced with bitterness. Michael's face, usually so composed, faltered for a moment. "What are you talking about, Laura?" "Oh, nothing," I replied, a cold smile playing on my lips. "Just a bit of a reality check. I know all about your secrets, Michael." His eyes widened slightly, and I could see a hint of panic flickering in them. It was a rare moment of vulnerability, one that I savored. "Everything Dad left behind will be inherited by me, his son," Michael said, his voice betraying a hint of desperation. I couldn't help but laugh, a short, humorless sound. "Is that what you think?" "You're about to face a much greater hell, Michael." The truth about Michael's secret life was about to unravel, and with it, the facade of our marriage. I knew that the coming days would be tumultuous, but I was ready to see Michael get what he deserved. As we left the cemetery, I took one last look at Charles's grave. He had been the only person in Michael's family who had shown me genuine kindness. And for his sake, if nothing else, I was determined to see this through to the end. The past few years with Michael flashed before my eyes as I sat in our quiet, almost desolate living room. I remembered the hesitant joy I felt when we decided to marry. I was 25 then, young and perhaps a bit naive. Moving in with his parents, Charles and Evelyn, seemed like a daunting step, but their warmth made it easier. I had quit my job at 28, hoping to start a family and support Charles, whose health was declining. Life had a semblance of normalcy then, with the occasional laughter and the routine challenges of a young wife. But the signs were there, subtle at first, like the ripples before a storm. Michael's late nights at work, the weekend trips he claimed were for business, and the ever-growing distance between us. One night, as Michael slept, his phone buzzed incessantly. Driven by a suspicion I couldn't shake off, I checked it. The texts were from a woman named Sophia, filled with intimate words and plans for their next rendezvous. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of anger, betrayal, and sorrow flooding through me. The next morning, over breakfast, I decided to confront him. "Michael, who's Sophia?" I asked, my voice deceptively calm. He choked on his coffee, coughing. "What? Who's Sophia?" "Don't play dumb. I saw the messages. Who is she?" I pressed, my voice rising. Michael's face hardened. "It's nothing. Just work stuff. You're being paranoid." I slammed my hand on the table, causing our son Alex to look up from his cereal. "Don't lie to me, Michael. I read the messages. They were anything but work stuff." He glared at me, his eyes cold. "You had no right to go through my phone. That's a violation of my privacy." "Privacy? Is that what you call cheating on your wife?" I spat back, feeling a bitter taste in my mouth. Michael stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I don't have to explain myself to you. You're just a housewife. What would you know?" I felt a sting at his words, but I held my ground. "A housewife who's been keeping your home, raising your son while you gallivant around with some mistress. I deserve better than this, Michael." He snorted. "You deserve better? You're lucky to have me. Without me, you're nothing." His words cut deep, but they also ignited a fire within me. I knew then that our marriage was beyond salvaging. It was time for Michael to face the consequences of his actions. The tension in the house was palpable after the breakfast confrontation. Michael had left in a huff, and I was left to ponder my next move. It was clear that our marriage was a sham, a facade that I could no longer maintain. The evidence of Michael's affair was not just a betrayal. It was the catalyst for a much-needed change. I decided to take action, starting with a call to Evelyn, who had always been more of a mother to me than a mother-in-law. "Evelyn, we need to talk. It's about Michael," I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "What's wrong, dear?" Evelyn's voice was laced with concern. "It's Michael. He's having an affair," I said bluntly, the words tasting bitter. There was a pause on the other end, a heavy silence that spoke volumes. I had my suspicions, but I didn't want to believe it. Evelyn finally replied, her voice tinged with sadness. "We agreed to meet in person to discuss everything. I knew this was just the beginning of a long and difficult journey." Later that day, Michael returned home, his demeanor one of forced nonchalance. "So, have you calmed down now?" he asked, a mocking tone in his voice. I looked at him, my resolve hardening. "Calm? No, Michael. I'm far from calm. I've decided what to do next." "And what's that?" he asked, a smirk playing on his lips. "I want a divorce, Michael. I can't be part of this lie anymore," I stated, my voice unwavering. Michael's smirk disappeared, replaced by a look of disbelief. "Divorce? You think you can just decide that on your own?" "It's not just my decision. Your actions made it inevitable," I countered. He laughed, a cold, harsh sound. "You think you can survive without me? You're nothing but a housewife, Laura. You have no idea how the world works." "That may be, but I'd rather face the world alone than live another day in this sham of a marriage. And I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you are," I retorted, the words fueled by years of pent-up frustration and hurt. Michael's face turned red with anger. "You wouldn't dare." "Oh, I would. And I will," I said, a sense of empowerment rising within me. This was the tipping point, the moment when the facade crumbled and the battle lines were drawn. I was ready to fight for my dignity, for my son's future. Michael had underestimated me for far too long. It was time for him to face the consequences of his actions. In the days following my declaration, the house became a battleground of icy silences and sharp exchanges. Michael's arrogance was palpable, but I was undeterred. Armed with the evidence of his infidelity, I started to plan my next moves. Evelyn was my rock during this time. She, too, was disillusioned with her son's actions. "I never raised him to be this way," she confessed during one of our many late-night talks. "Charles would have been devastated to see what Michael has become." I nodded, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. "We'll get through this, Evelyn. We'll make sure he doesn't get away with it." My first step was to meet with the lawyer Charles had introduced me to years ago. He was an old family friend and was appalled by Michael's behavior. "We'll make sure he pays for this," he assured me, his eyes steely. We started by cutting Michael off from Charles's inheritance. The will was clear, and with Charles's recent amendments, Michael's entitlement was reduced to a pittance. This hit him hard. He had always assumed he would inherit a significant sum, and the reality of his situation was a bitter pill to swallow. The news of his affair and his subsequent disinheritance spread like wildfire. I made sure of it. His reputation, both within our social circles and at his workplace, began to crumble. The smug, confident man I had married was now a shadow of his former self, his arrogance replaced by a desperate, almost pitiable, need to salvage his image. But I didn't stop there. "You won't get a penny in alimony," I told him during one of our confrontations, "and I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you are." Michael's response was a mix of anger and disbelief. "You can't do this to me. I'm your husband." "You were my husband," I corrected him coldly. "Now, you're just a man who betrayed his family." Evelyn supported me every step of the way. We became a united front against Michael, a team determined to see justice served. And as the legal proceedings began, it became clear that Michael was fighting a losing battle. His attempts to turn the tide were feeble and easily countered. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and his pleas fell on deaf ears. He was a man undone, his actions catching up to him in the most spectacular of ways. As I watched him flounder, a part of me felt vindicated. This was the karma he deserved. But there was no joy in it, only a deep sense of sorrow for what could have been and a determination to build a better future for Alex and myself. The finality of the divorce proceedings brought a sense of closure, yet the aftermath was anything but simple. Michael, stripped of his inheritance and his dignity, was a mere shadow of the man he once was. His downfall was not just legal and financial, it was a total collapse of the facade he had built around himself. Evelyn and I watched as Michael's world unraveled. He had lost his job, a consequence of the scandal and his tarnished reputation. His once lavish lifestyle was now a distant memory, replaced by mounting debts and a stark reality that he had never prepared for. One evening, as I sat with Evelyn in the living room, a sense of peace settled over me. "We did it, Evelyn. We showed him he couldn't just walk over us," I said, a small smile on my lips. Evelyn nodded, her eyes reflecting a mix of sadness and strength. "Yes, we did. Charles would have been proud of you, Laura. You stood up for yourself and Alex." Speaking of Michael, she continued, "I never imagined my own son would end up like this. But he made his choices, and now he has to live with them." Michael's attempts to cling to his old life were futile. He moved in with his mistress, but their relationship was strained, built on lies and false promises. The news of their struggles reached us through the grapevine, tales of arguments and an impending eviction due to unpaid rent. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding my life with Alex. He was my priority, my beacon of hope in the midst of the chaos that had engulfed our lives. I found a part-time job, a modest but honest way to contribute to our household and provide for my son. Evelyn was a constant source of support, her wisdom and experience guiding me through the toughest of times. Together, we created a new normal, one where the pain of the past was a memory, not a daily burden. One day I received a call from Michael's mistress. Her voice was laced with desperation. "Laura, please, can you help us? Michael, he's lost everything. We have nothing." I listened, feeling a mixture of pity and resolve. "I'm sorry for what you're going through, but Michael's choices led you both here. I have to think about my son now." Hanging up, I realized how far I had come. The Laura who had once feared confrontation was now a woman who stood her ground, who had faced adversity and emerged stronger. As I looked at Alex playing in the garden, a sense of hope filled me. We had weathered the storm, and now it was time to look forward to brighter days. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready for it, armed with the strength and resilience I had discovered within myself.